so it wouldn't be wasted space, and therefore the issue of the rear third level deck would go away, so to speak. So that's essentially the path Mr. Walsh took, and to try to accomplish what at least we believe the board's concerns were that were being raised. So that is the new plan that has been submitted before you tonight. And I'm going to call back to the stand Mr. Gorleski, our architect, to briefly, because it's fairly self-evident, but briefly discuss the new plan compared to the original plan.
Mr. Hirsch, you don't have any additional witnesses tonight that...
I did not plan to call Mr. Walsh. If the need arises, I will,
Yeah.
but I just, plan
fine.
to call Mr. Ed Gorleski.
Yeah, Mr. Gorleski was sworn in at our last meeting, so he remains under oath, as well as our professionals, Ms. Bell and Mr. Frieda. Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Kittrick. All right, Ed, you're on. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So Ed, you heard my introductory remarks. You have placed a new plan in front of the board. Why don't you give the board your description of what you did, how you arrived at this with Mr. Walsh, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty good. After the last month's meeting, I sat down and had a discussion with my client. And, basically we decided to follow the recommendations of the board and Mr. Frieda, and we eliminated that rear deck on the south side of the property and converted that to storage space for the residents.
And there was no other changes, or were there any other changes to the structure that was before the board the first night, other than what you just explained, the removal of the third floor deck and the creation of the storage space as was suggested at the last meeting?
No, that was the only change we made.
Now, I know you'd mentioned to me earlier about the possibility of changing some grade in the back. We had that 0.1 of a foot variance for the so-called rear deck, which is a stoop for the rear steps to get in the back door. But we're still seeking that variance, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you discussed that, and it just would not work out with the height of the steps to try to get rid of that 0.1, if you will.
Right. There's a step down from the first floor to that landing. And if we made that landing any lower, it would have been too big of a step down.
I think Mr. Frieda's report, his revised report, he notes that the previously, because it was the interpretation, I guess, of the zoning officer, Mr. Frieda, that the decks were included in living space, and therefore we were looking at, based on his prior report, the third level being 90.3% of the floor below instead of the 50%. And his new report indicates it's now down to 65.7%. So we still need a variance, but we've drastically changed, based on those calculations, what we were originally seeking, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I do know, just to clear up the record, I had done this with an email between Mr. Frieda and myself previously, but his report still refers to the width of the lot being 25 feet. It's actually 40 feet. It's still a variance. It's, because the ordinance requires 50. It's a pre-existing condition, of course, but just so there's no confusion about that, it's a 40-foot wide lot. Now, Mr. Frieda's report on the general comments, he makes some typical comments about some improvements that might be required. And one is the applicant should pipe the roof stormwater runoff to a pop-up emitter in the front yard. And the applicant will be able to comply with that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. They want a note added to the plan that the existing curb and sidewalk along the frontage will be replaced. He's indicating it's in very poor condition, so during the new construction, that would be replaced. And the applicant's going to agree to that, correct?
Yes.
Or the other is a typical, naturally, will provide the evidence that the taxes are paid current. And that's pretty much those conditions. So that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's essentially all I have for Mr. Gillespie. I mean, the plan's pretty straightforward. It was, as I said, trying to just comply to Mr. Frieda's suggestion and then the board's concerns about the rear deck. So I'll turn Mr. Gillespie over to the board for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Hear none, see none. Any questions from the general public to Mr. Gillespie?
I just have one thing
Yes, Kristen.
quickly. While I appreciate the effort to comply more so with the borough's requirements, I think it is important just to note that a variance is still required for the livable area on that third floor. And just a little testimony as to why it's necessary, I think would be beneficial.
Okay. Appreciate that. Mr. Hirsch?
Yeah, at the first hearing, just to go back, we tried to cover that general area by establishing the character of the neighborhood and the general area surrounding the neighborhood. You recall that we introduced several exhibits, photographs of homes, and we went through the location of each one of those on the exhibits, the proximity to this property and all their locations. Some were very, very proximate to this location, showing that the second and third floor decks, third floor, third level decks in the general area and throughout the municipality. We were also demonstrating at that time by the testimony we presented that where you're seeing this is in the relatively newer and sometimes very new construction in the municipality in the borough. So the argument we made at the time was this is when you're building a new home now in Bradley Beach and of course many of the shore communities, you see the old bungalows, the older homes being replaced with these newer homes and with the third level, because whether it's, I don't want to get into whether it's a half story, third story issue, but the third level with the decks both being side, front, rear, we showed all sorts of situations. So we were trying to establish our burden to show that this, has no adverse impact on the adjoining properties or the zone plan, because it's consistent with the character of the neighborhood, which is one of the aspects of the negative criteria of the municipal land use law. So that we were trying to, establish that this is also for a community that's by the ocean to get the maximum enjoyment out of the property without having any adverse impact, because there's always a balancing with the variance that what is the detrimental impact. I mean, there will always be some, but is it substantial? So what we were trying to establish is this had no adverse impact. You had the entire neighborhood, even beyond the neighborhood, of residents testifying in support of the application to show that everybody believed that this neighborhood, and you saw the photographs of what existed on this property prior to my client purchasing it and then proposing, obviously he hasn't built it yet, what he's proposing. It was run down, demolished, a house that looked like it should have been demolished. And the nature of this neighborhood, some of the board members even commented that this would be a tremendous improvement to this area of town and to this particular neighborhood. So it was for those reasons that we thought this improvement furthered the purposes of municipal land use law, adds such an improvement to the neighborhood, an upgrade to the neighborhood without having any at all substantial detriment. So that testimony, I'm giving you, the legal premises. That testimony was presented at the first hearing by Mr. Walsh and by many of the witnesses that testified.
Ms. Bell, is that all right?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board now?
I just have one thing with the third floor. I've seen some beautiful third floor construction, and they actually have gutters on the third floor now. That also helps with the water problem. So I know you addressed the water issue earlier with the pop-up. Are there any plans to have that the gutter system on the third floor?
You would have to answer that.
Ed?
I would think so. I don't know how they're working that. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could be incorporated.
I mean, I just think, as I ride my bike every day, I see beautiful homes similar to this one. And given the impact and the amount of water that comes down now, it's already proven that these deluges are coming in. I'm just thinking ahead about even more enhanced protection with those gutter systems on the floors.
No, it's a good idea and a good point. I mean, nobody wants the water just run off the side of the deck and down the side of the house. I mean, it's bound to leak at some point if you do that. So the gutters would, be a good idea to help control some of that water coming down.
So
Thank
you're gonna add that to the plan, Mr. Galiski?
Yes.
In front of plan?
Yep.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yes,
Go ahead.
no. Mr. Gattell?
I'm just a little bit confused because I've looked at what went through the zoning, what happened last month, and I'm confused as why the outside space is considered livable space and why this family is trying to improve the neighborhood. I've lived in that neighborhood since 1985. That neighborhood is not what one would consider the best part of town. And I just, reading the zoning being dropped twice on the zoning, and last month that we didn't address this, and there was a major thing going on that the outside space is livable space. I'm just a little bit confused. I've been in this business for 40 years dealing with towns, and I don't understand where the ordinance is. I've read the ordinance, I don't know how many times, but I don't understand where the interpretation is that what they were trying to do last month, that the outside space was considered livable space. Can somebody explain that to me?
Mr. Frida?
Yes. First of all, even before that point, third floor decks are not allowed. Okay. So just going by that point alone, they need a variance for any decks on the third floor. All right. It's an interpretation that we have made with the zoning officer moving forward. And until the zoning rules of the town get changed, that's how we're going to enforce it moving forward. We understand it's something people want. We understand the negative criteria that other people don't want to be looked at from high above into their yards. So there's two sides to the coin. We're doing the best we can with the ordinance that we have. And until it gets rewritten, we're going to continue to interpret it that way.
But they had 6 or 8 or more people, neighbors, that suggested that this was the right thing to do.
That doesn't matter. That does not matter when we look at the ordinances. It's
So now
great
what
that
we're-
everyone's in favor in this condition, in this case. But what happens with the next one when everybody's against it? You can't make a ruling based on what the neighbors want. You have to make a ruling based on the ordinance. And that's our current interpretation of the current ordinance.
So now what we're doing is basically giving them substantially more indoor space that could potentially be built out as livable space down the road versus having outdoor space that could not be built as livable space. Is that?
You can look
is
at it any way you
correct
like.
interpretation?
You can look at it any way that you like. You go on people's words that they're getting their approval for storage. If they do any improvements to their property, they're supposed to get permits, and it will get picked up at the permit process. But listen, I can only work with the ordinance. I can't make it up. I can't interpret it. I have to go with what's there.
But again, I couldn't find it in the ordinance that said outdoor space is livable space, unless I'm missing something somewhere.
Probably the better time to discuss this would be give my office a call, and I'd be happy to speak with you.
Okay.
Or call the zoning officer and speak with the zoning officer.
Mr. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Gratelli raises an interesting issue that perhaps, and this may not be the proper place to raise it in the meeting, but perhaps we should inform the council that we should be looking for some clarity in this ordinance, just so everybody knows what the rule is moving forward. Wherever, you have interpretation versus, black letter ordinance, I would think it's probably better just to have them vote, clarify what it is, and then we all have the same place moving forward. My question is to either Mr. Frieda or to the expert witness. As far as the interior space, how much more interior space do we have than is regularly allowed under the current ordinance?
Their current plan is about, 15% over. It's 65, okay. They're supposed to be 50.
Okay.
For livable space.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Anybody else on the board?
I just want to if I could have a clarification from the engineer as to the gutters.
Yes.
He's muted.
Mr.
No, I'm not.
Sorry. I meant the architect. I apologize, Mr. Gorleski.
As in, will we put the gutters on the decks?
Yeah, so where are they going to be, and what do you know what the size will be?
I don't know if the size will be, probably 4 or 5 inch gutters, but they'll be around the trim board around the deck. We can incorporate the gutters into that, and then work the downspouts down to grade somewhere.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Gillespie or Mr. Hirsch from general public? And you got the hand up, Christine?
Yes, 107 Park Place.
107 Park Place. Question, please. Unmute yourself.
Hello.
Name?
My name is Marty Gillis, and as you can see, 107 Park Place.
This is a question. It's a question only. Continue.
Okay. I am a taxpayer, okay? And I'd like to make a comment.
Comments later. Comments later. It's only for question.
So when is the comment section?
Shortly.
After the next go round.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions from the general public?
Most people are not participating with video, so I can't see if they have their physical hand up, but I don't have any virtual hands up.
Okay. Now, any other general comments from the board? Any general comments now from the public? Now, oh wait, Ms. Rosen.
Harvey, I have a question. Did we get the survey actually? I know we had asked for a physical survey, and I know it says there was a surveyor listed on the plans. But did we get a separate survey, or is it incorporated in here somehow?
No, we have a survey. We have a survey.
Oh, we do have one.
They would have never been deemed complete to move forward if they hadn't submitted a survey.
It was in the first packet.
It was in the first packet.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, because that was something that had been questioned prior, and I just wanted to make sure. And then photos of the house, I guess this is our photo on the plan, right?
Correct.
That was requested? Okay. And as far as livable space, we're not over?
We're over by about 15.
They are over.
7.
That's why they're asking for a variance.
Okay, so that's what it's.
Originally 90%.
Thank you.
But the variance they're asking for now is much less than what they had come for from the beginning.
Okay, that's what I needed clarification. Thank you.
Yes, far less.
Okay.
Other comments from the board? Any comments from the general public? Now 107 Park Place. Give us your
Hello,
name,
are you able?
address, and you'll be sworn in.
107 Park Place, and my name is Margaret Gillis.
Margaret, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth tonight's proceeding?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you.
And I'm surprised that the public, when they're commenting, has to raise their hands.
Well, we're swearing you in. That's why.
Well, I'm surprised that it's a swearing-in process for the public, especially for commenting. I'm not giving testimony.
Yeah,
But
actually, you are giving testimony. That's why you have to be sworn in. Is exactly what you're doing. Just
Okay.
like the experts were sworn in at the last meeting, you two are sworn in. So you have the floor.
Okay, basically, we are next door to this property. We've been next door to the property for 20 years. And it was an elderly family that lived there. And of course, they were unable to do anything. And now Mr. Welsh has acquired the property, and what he's trying to do, we feel is reasonable. It is, for all intents and purposes, an urban area near the beach. And so, hopefully that this will be resolved so he can start to build and his family can and start to enjoy the property.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? Nobody? Mr. Walsh, Mr. Hirsch. Mr. Hirsch.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Well, that's our case. Don't have to call Mr. Walsh. We appreciate, the time the board's put in on this. We had our give and take last week. I know Mr. Frieda's been, we had conversations even before the hearing, trying to figure out ordinances and interpretations. It's never easy. But the board has its interpretation, and we've tried to do everything we can to make this originally a variance-free application, as my client testified when we introduced the first two zoning permit reports as to what deficiencies there were. The plans were changed. My client has changed the plans for the garage apartment in the house several times to try to comply with every issue that was raised. And now he's come in with this compromise to try to meet the board's concerns about the rear yard deck. So we think, as you've heard, this is a tremendous improvement to the neighborhood. It'll lift that area up. These people have real roots in Bradley Beach, and this is the home they want to make for their long time to come. So we ask the board for their approval. Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve the variance request for the Walsh residence, Block 25, Lot 8, 103 Park Place, file number BBBA 20-09, with the following conditions: that there'll be gutter from the roof decks, that the applicant should pipe the roof stormwater runoff to a pop-up emitter in the front yard, and that a general note that the existing curbs and sidewalks will be replaced. Anything else?
Second.
I'll second.
Ms. Phillips is my second.
Sure.
Mr. Critelli,
I agree, yes.
Mr. Afuso,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes, I think it's going to be a great improvement. Thank you for working with us, and I wish you a lot of luck, Walsh, as we're lucky to have you in Bradley Beach.
Mr. Wade,
I vote yes.
Mr. Quinlan,
I vote yes. I think it's going to be a big improvement, and look forward to seeing it.
Mr. Mayor?
Vote yes, and I appreciate Mr. Hirsch and the Walsh's compromise, and living space is a great compromise and getting rid of that back deck.
And Chair Rosenberg?
And I also vote yes, and wish you people luck in construction. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
Congratulations.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
luck,
All right,
Mr.
folks. I'll
Walsh.
talk to you later, Dan.
Mr. Walsh.
Thank you.
Mrs. Walsh.
Yeah.
Next case is another continuation. Greg Markley, Block 20, Lot 7, 603 Park Place. He's now represented by Richard D. Renaro. Mr. Finero?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Introduce myself. I'm Rich Finaro. I know that you there was one prior hearing on this, and I don't, from what my client tells me, Mr. McKay, that they didn't get off the ground so well. So we'd like to kind of do a little bit of a restart here. We do have professionals that will testify tonight on the issues that are part of the application. And I just was hoping I could provide the board with a brief overview of the application and how we got to the point that we're at tonight. Just briefly, the McKays acquired 603 Park Place in January of 2019. The McKays intend to make Bradley Beach their primary residence. They've sold their home in Robbinsville in Mercer County, and now are waiting until this project is complete so they can move into Bradley Beach permanently. When they acquired the property, and we'll go through, we have some pictures as exhibits which we've distributed to the board. When they acquired the property, there was an existing residential structure. That property was in poor condition. Once the McKays acquired the property, they engaged Fortunato Architecture, and a set of renovation plans were prepared. And this is a little bit of a unique application. My clients made application for permits, and they were granted permits in March. They completed a substantial amount of the construction between March and October, and then they were advised that the matter had not gone through a zoning review, so they had to stop construction. There was a denial by the zoning officer, which is why the application is now before the board. And I'm just providing that by way of, not by way of criticism of anybody, but just way of background so the record's complete. And there's an indication why my clients had performed some construction before we saw the board on this matter. So at this point, in order to complete the renovation project, there are 4 bulk variances that are going to be required. There's they need approval for a roof that's over the rear porch. They need setback relief for the rear porch on the west property line, and I believe you'll see you'll hear testimony that there was the backyard was essentially paved completely when they acquired the property. So if you look at the architectural plans and the survey, you see that there is concrete that actually extended closer to the west property line than the proposed deck does. They require relief on the side yard setback for both the front porch and the bump out they're doing on the second story. The bump out comes, it just squares off the front elevation of the property. Again, the application is maintaining the side wall of the building. They're not encroaching more into the setback at all. They're just maintaining the existing side wall of the old building, the building that they're renovating. And then finally, there's a variance required for building coverage due to the inclusion of the roofs, the covered porches in the calculation that was pointed out in Mr. Freda's review. Our witnesses tonight, Mr. Fortunato, who testified at the last hearing, is here again. He's the architect for the project. Greg McKay is on the meeting, and he's the property owner, and he will testify And he basically will sponsor the exhibits that we provided, the pictures, because they were made by Mr. McKay at his direction. And finally, we have James Kyle of Kyle McMahon Associates, who's our planning expert witness.
All right, so Mr. Fornero,
Yes.
we're going to swear them in along with our professionals, Ms. Bell and Mr. Frida. So if it's each one of your professionals along with Mr. McKay will raise the right hand. Mr. McKay, you're going to have to be unmuted. There we go. Well, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth tonight's proceeding?
I do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if we call our first witness, Mr. Fortunato, and I don't know if there was a general explanation of the scope of the project and what the McKays are trying to accomplish here, but Mr. McKay, Mr. Fortunato, I'd appreciate it if you would give us an overview of the project.
Absolutely. The project itself is essentially a complete renovation of the building as it stands. The only addition we really had is on the second floor. It was a 42 square foot addition, just to square off the front. It had just a bit of an odd look to the front. So we squared off the top, but pretty much the entire building has been renovated up from the interior. New framing, beams, and structural has been supporting this new design. The front porch was there, but we had to take it down just due to, it was just unsafe and unstable. So we redesigned the front porch, but we also extended it around the side of the house and also added a balcony effect on the second level, so people can go out there on the second level. The rear deck was added, as well as a roof overhang over that deck in the back section. And it was stated earlier that we had a lot of concrete that we removed in the back to help with the impervious coverage calculations. So essentially, this has been really more of an interior renovation project with a front porch deck addition on the project. And that's essentially it for the structure itself.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Fortunato? All right, we'd like to call Mr. McKay as our second witness.
Before we do that, any questions from Mr. Chairman?
Any questions from the board for Mr. Fornato? Any questions from the general public, Mr. Fornato?
Don't see any.
Ms. Rosenberg?
I just have a question. I thought we were discussing a second floor deck in the rear. Was that?
No, there is no second floor deck in the rear.
Okay.
Any other questions for this gentleman?
Okay, thank you.
Continue.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. McKay, the reason Mr. McKay's been sworn, Mr. McKay is the property owner, and we have submitted as part of our supplemental package a series of photographs that I know all the board members have, and they're also on the website that they can be looked at as well. So, and Mr. McKay, just briefly, were these pictures taken by you or at your direction?
They were taken by me.
Okay, and when you start with the pictures in the beginning, and I think they're well organized. The structure you see in the white was the old original condition of the house when you acquired it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then as you flip through the pages, you have you've basically shown the elevation and the condition when you first acquired it, and then as it now stands. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And just for some clarification purposes too, the condition of the lot. When you acquired the property, there was a concrete driveway to the eastern property line. Is that correct?
Yeah. It went all the way to the back, and then there was basically like you would almost say a basketball, like half a basketball court back there.
Okay. And that concrete extended almost virtually to the eastern property line. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was maybe 5 or 6 feet off the line.
Okay. And For the board's benefit, the photograph identified as number 10 in the packet would show you the condition of the concrete in the rear of the property, and I think that's important for consideration with the variance we need for the setback on the rear porch. And right at this point, and now you heard my opening, is that correct?
Yes.
When I discussed the series of steps that had occurred that led to your renovation project being stopped at the end of last year.
Yes.
Okay, and all that, what I explained, just for the board's purposes, that was accurate, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I don't have anything further of Mr. or Mrs. McKay.
Anybody from the board have any questions on this for Mr. McKay? Mr. Alfuso?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think your project looks great. I've walked past your house, it looks fabulous. But I want to understand the process here. Your council offered that permits were granted in March of 2019. Construction began March 2019, and then you were asked to cease construction in October of 2019 due to a zoning review.
So
go ahead.
So we were never asked to stop construction.
Okay.
We were asked to submit for zoning, but to this day, I mentioned this in the last meeting, I've never got a stop work order. I've never got anything like that. So that never happened. Obviously, I can't complete the project until I get past this.
Sure.
So
I have a question. Is there any change since the original permit was issued? Is there any change to the building since the original permit was issued?
There's no change to the building from, no.
Porches, patios?
No, what was submitted to the plans that were submitted to zoning are the current plans.
The original plan, for the original permit.
Right.
So I guess that my question, it might be to Mr. Frieda, it might be to your counsel. How did the zoning officer then intervene so far down this line?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that. I haven't spoken to him. This is a very odd circumstance, but the application is here before us. There are 4 variances that everyone agrees needs to be done. But to give you background on how we got here, I think the applicant's attorney did about as good a job as anybody. I'd have nothing else to add. I don't know how that all happened.
Did Mr. Farino go back and ask our zoning officer what brought this about?
Mr. Chairman, no, we did not ask that question. And again, when I started my opening, I simply laid this out as a factual chronology without being critical of anybody that was a professional representing Bradley Beach. I just thought it was important for the board to know why we were here with a 3/4 completed house, and now we're asking for the variances we should have had before we started. So I think, frankly, the variances are minimal in my estimation, and perhaps it was simply an oversight by the gentleman that was reviewing the plans for the purposes of issuing the construction permits. So that being said, I just thought it was important that you knew the background on this project.
I think this is part of the background as well.
Yeah, and so it doesn't sound like there's anything untoward happened. No. And the reality is we have accepted jurisdiction, and this is now a variance application. You agree, Counselor?
Yes, I do.
Okay, going back. Is there any other questions for Mr. McKay?
I just have one. It's just peculiar. So that last part of the house that sticks out, was the original wall of the house in the back?
When you say the last part,
right past the porch, there's just like a box at the back of the house. It looks like.
In the back of the house?
that goes onto the driveway. I'm just thinking, why, was that the original part that was
Picture
there?
10, are you talking about, Deidre?
Are you talking about the fireplace?
No, the rear of the house.
In the rear of the house, the rear of the house is there's no bump out. There was a small little, there were steps, the concrete steps out of the house originally.
Okay. No, I just wonder if it just looks like there's a big piece added to the back of the house, that's all, from the picture.
No.
From number 2.
Yeah,
You
Mrs. Phillips, if I could possibly clarify, if you look at photo 1,
Right.
I know the exact bump out you're talking
Yes,
about.
that.
You can see it there, and what has happened is the porch that now wraps towards the east property line kind of makes it look a little bit smaller visually, but it's just tying into that one wall. Yeah. So that's always been there.
Okay. All right. It just, that's the way it is. It's there. Okay.
There's no further questions of the board for Mr. And Mrs. McKay.
Anybody from the general public? Christine?
I don't see anyone, no.
Now continue.
We'd like to call James Kyle as our professional planner to offer testimony in support of the variances.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So,
Maybe you
Rich, I
just
guess
give
I'll just run through.
Your
Yeah,
expertise.
I've not testified before this board, so I'm happy to do that. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning and Design, which I received from Rutgers in 1996. I've been a practicing planner for over 20 years. I currently advise 10 municipalities as their planning consultant, sitting with zoning boards and planning boards, mostly in Hunterdon and Warren counties. I've also appeared before and been qualified as an expert in planning by over 225 boards in the state. I'm licensed as a professional planner by the state of New Jersey. I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners.
Okay, thank you. Continue. Continue.
So I was retained by the applicant to review the planning issues associated with this application. I've met with the client and counsel. We discussed the construction that's occurred to date. I've also visited the site and seen the surroundings. I've reviewed all the plans and reports, including the reports of your board professionals. I've also reviewed the zoning ordinance and the master plan. This is block 20, lot 7. It's with an address of 603 Park Place Avenue. The property is 50 by 100. It's 5,000 square feet exactly, and currently contains the existing single-family detached dwelling that's been under construction for some time. All the immediately surrounding uses are residential in nature. There is one lot to our immediate east, which is a single family house, but it also has a building that contains 2 apartments, and that sits immediately adjacent to the property line. It's about, if you see the survey, it's about 7/10 of a foot off of the property line. The property is located in the R1 single family residential zone where the single family use is permitted. And as we've talked about, the applicant commenced the construction based on the permits issued. There was a small addition to the front on the second floor of the 42 square feet that Mr. Fortunato discussed. And there were also the construction of the covered front porch that wraps around to the side, which does include a second story, and there's also a covered rear deck at the property. With the exception of the porches and decks that were constructed, the footprint of this structure is identical to what existed previously. So I think that answers Ms. Phillips' question about that bump out. And that's actually a feature that's pretty common to the homes in this neighborhood. If you go down the street, you see quite a few of these that have that rear bump out, most times in the rear left corner of the structures. So we do require 4 variances. I think Mr. Fornaro summarized those accurately, so I'll dispense with actually summarizing them, and I'll kind of jump right into the testimony here. So as far as the roof over the rear deck, I think this does meet the C2 criteria in that there are purposes of municipal land use law that are promoted by the grant of the variance, and the benefits outweigh the detriments. The 2 purposes that jump out to me are purpose A, to promote the general welfare, and also purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment. The addition of the roof on the porch provides additional privacy, not only for the homeowners, but also for those surrounding dwellings. The apartment structure that I mentioned, that's on lot 8, that's 7/10 of a foot. It's a 2-story structure, and there are about 6 windows on that structure that face immediately into the backyard of this lot. So putting the roof over that deck structure will actually allow a little more privacy, not just for the applicant, but also for those surrounding properties. It's also going to conceal, there's some living space at the rear of the structure near that porch that will be better concealed with the roof structure. So we feel that this is a good option for privacy, not just for our client, but also for those surrounding properties. There's also one of the lots adjacent also has a hot tub in the backyard that sits immediately next to the fence and to the rear of the property. So we think there is some benefit to allowing that roof structure there. The covered roof, in my opinion, won't negatively impact surrounding properties. Again, it's really intended to provide better privacy for all parties that are adjacent to the site. And aside from the apartment structure that we talked about, there are no other portions of any dwellings that are immediately adjacent to this. The lot to our west has a garage structure that is located immediately adjacent. So it pretty well shields that lot from view of that covered porch. And the garages on lots 6 and 11 really shield that from view from the other homes. So I don't think there'll be any substantial impact from the inclusion of the roof over that deck. As far as the potential impairment of the intent of the standards and the master plan, in reviewing all the master plan documents and the 2 reexamination reports that were prepared in 2014 and 2018, there's not really any specific rationale offered for why there's a restriction on the roof over the rear deck. But there are purposes of the ordinance that are listed in section 270-2, and that's quite simply to provide rules, regulations, and standards to guide land development in the borough in order to provide for the orderly growth and development of the borough and to promote the comfort, health, safety, convenience, and general welfare of the borough in conformance with the master plan and zoning. The 2018 reexamination report also noted goals and objectives. And one that stood out to me was goal F, and that notes that the single family character of the borough is a very important asset. The rehabilitation and infill of housing stock should be encouraged where appropriate while maintaining the character, scale, and privacy of the established residential neighborhoods in the borough. So I feel that in reviewing those, the purpose of the ordinance as well as the goals and objectives, that the grant of this variance responds to that goal related to maintaining privacy. The side yard setback variances, and this relates to not only the porch on the front and the deck on the rear, the covered porch on the rear, but also that 42 square foot addition that was on the 2nd floor. This I feel also meets the C2 criteria. Same 2 purposes, purpose A and I that were identified previously. So if you look at the survey, this house is slightly skewed on the lot. So the front yard setback, the setback at the front is 4.9, and then the building kind of angles slowly towards the property line where we have 4 feet at the rear of the structure. The front setback, 5 feet is required there. The 1/10 of a foot is, in my estimation, truly de minimis, and we're providing about 80% of the required setback for the porch at the rear. I think what this accomplishes, it provides a consistent appearance to the west side of the building, continuing the line of the house that exists, and it's going to eliminate any odd little jogs that would be required to comply with that. So, you know, if we were coming in here before the structure was built to get these variances, I think there would be some good logic to including those because we could eliminate, you know, little oddities in the design of the building. So this will result, in my estimation, in a more attractive structure as viewed from the neighbors' lots and also from the street. The setback departures here, in my mind, won't substantially impact surrounding properties. This really continues the established building line that we have on the west side of the lot. When you look specifically at lot 6, which is immediately to our west, that dwelling is situated on the west side of that lot, and there's a two-car wide driveway that is kind of between that house and this proposed structure. So I think that kind of tends to eliminate any potential substantial impact just based on the positioning of that dwelling. And that would be the dwelling that would be most impacted by these departures. Also, the porches, if you've looked at the architecture and the pictures, are open on the side. So it has a roof and columns, but it's largely open. So we're not really increasing the building wall as you go down the side of the building. So it's not creating additional mass along that building line. It's open and you can see through it. So I think that is a mitigating factor here. As far as any impairment to the intent of the standards, again, no specific rationale for why these specific setback standards are offered in the ordinance, but from a general planning perspective, setbacks are geared at providing adequate light, air, and open space. I think given the position of the existing structure on lot 6 and what I would say is relatively minor departures in terms of the setbacks, and then the open nature of the porches, I think that intent is largely met. And again, we're respecting that existing building wall and setback that has existed. So I think the benefits here outweigh any potential detriments. As far as the building coverage variance, again, I think this also meets the C2 criteria, same two purposes, A and I. The increase in building coverage here is largely driven by the porch areas. If you saw the plans that were submitted, there was a note on there that building coverage was about, I think it was 24.9%, but when you include the porches, that drives it up to 41.6%. So I think the covered porches, in this case, particularly in the front, contribute to the overall aesthetic appeal of the renovation. It's consistent with porches that we see on this section of the block. So if you look at the houses at 516, 600, 602, and 608, they all have a very similar wraparound porch that wraps around down the side. I think it also tends to mitigate or limit the impact of that bump out at the rear that Ms. Phillips identified. So we've essentially reduced the impact of that, we'll call it extrusion into the lot by attaching the porch to that area. So it really kind of minimizes that and unifies the appearance. The covered porch on the rear, again, really serves to increase privacy for both the homeowner and the apartment on lot 8. So I think there is some benefit to the grant of the variance there. Again, largely driven, or not largely, entirely driven by the inclusion of the covered porches, because if the porches were not covered, they would not count towards building area. So the increase that we're seeking here, I don't think will substantially impact the surrounding lots. If you do the math, this amounts to about a 330 square foot increase. You know, percentage-wise, it might seem a little high, but when you think about the small lot that we have at 5,000 square feet, 330 square feet is relatively nominal. This increase is largely associated with the porches. As I said, they're primarily open, so they don't necessarily increase the mass of the building and its appearance in any way. So I think based on that, there won't be any substantial impact to surrounding properties based on that. And then in terms of any impairment or potential impairment to the intent of the standards, again, another standard that there's no specific rationale for, but this is essentially an intensity control that's aimed at limiting the aerial coverage on the lot, but it also in turn regulates the mass of the structure. So I think since the increase here is sought related to the porches and those porches are open, when you think about what the possible intent of that standard would be, I think there's no substantial impairment of that. So I think the visual benefits here of the porches largely outweigh any potential detriments. Mr. Chairman, that's all I had in the way of direct. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you.
Is that a flat roof on the back?
No, it's a pitched roof.
The one that's jutting out. Oh, I'm just thinking for like some water, capturing water would be great up there if it was flat.
No, it's a pitched roof.
Okay.
I have a question. That was added, and but you have that's 300 square feet. That's it's quite a bit. There's nothing you could do except take it down and refix it, correct? To correct it?
That's right. And I think, I agree with the assessment that, someone offered. It's a bit of a unique situation. I think, the applicant sought permits and started construction in good faith. I think that, there was nothing sinister here. I think it was, a permit that was perhaps granted in error without the zoning review. So, it's a bit of a unique situation. And Mr. Chairman, yes, that the only way to remedy this would be to remove those portions of the structure.
And that would be the rear porch, correct?
Well, the rear porch is only 230 square feet, so that wouldn't necessarily take care of the entire problem, but it would take care of a portion of it, yes.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the general public?
I have Ms. Kwiatkowski.
Hi. This question is, when I'm looking at the exhibit photos originally submitted, the last photo appears to be a picture of 603 in its original state, and that contained a front porch. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is the current porch equal to the size of that original front porch or slightly larger?
It is slightly larger.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Steve M., got to unmute.
Hi, Steve Mijak. I own the property with my wife at 601 Park Place, also known as 909 Hammond. I didn't have a question as much as a comment. Am I wrong with that?
Comments are later.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll get you later.
Any other questions?
Don't see any.
Any other comments from, questions or comments from the board? I know we have to pick, our problem here is we have to pick up an error that was done by the zoning officer, so we have to be careful what we're doing as well. So.
I don't believe it was the zoning officer. I think it was the construction official.
The construction official, okay, we take it away. Construction.
Is there any, I'm just thinking, is there any way to have like greenery in the driveway? So you have 2 strips and some stones, and we have some area of impervious coverage.
Well, actually, Ms. Phillips, this application complies with the impervious coverage requirement. This is really for the building coverage requirement.
Building coverage.
Yep.
Am I to understand that this building is basically what was in place before, and you're just rehabilitating the structure that was there in the past?
That is true. There are some additions, not to the footprint of the structure, but the porches and the rear deck with the covered roof. There was a front porch on this, but the front porch that exists now is larger than that one. And then the deck and the covered roof at the rear did not exist. So those are really the 2 changes to the structure overall.
So you're basically just enhancing the house and the neighborhood?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
And you're correcting the front yard setback to be on a sight line with the others in the neighborhood, correct? Within a foot.
Yes, it's largely consistent. We no longer need front yard setback relief because we did submit a survey to the borough, and it was reviewed by your professionals, and they found that it met the criteria that a front yard setback variance was not necessary.
Correct, Mr. Frieda?
Yes, that is correct. They did submit the proper information provided by a licensed surveyor, and everything complies.
Okay. So I want to make sure everything's on the record. That's.
Yep.
Anybody else from the board? Any comments now from the general public? Now, Steve.
Hi, Steve Mijak.
Got to give your name and be sworn in.
Stephen Mijak, 601 Park Place Ave, also known as 909 Hammond Ave.
If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth of tonight's proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
My only comment is Greg is, rehabilitating that house, which was an eyesore. The property looks great now. It's coming along beautifully. I have no issues with what he's trying to accomplish there. And I think it's going to add substantially to the neighborhood. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Cindy Kwiatkowski, 200 Ocean Park Avenue, Unit 4D.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth tonight's proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
I, too, am in support of any ordinance approvals that this property needs for moving ahead, or variances, I'm sorry. I pass this property on my way to work and from work. I appreciate greatly that they, in good faith, utilized the existing structure and did not knock down an existing home to build a massive structure on a property and are asking for 14 variances. I think, you know, it was transformed and with the existing structure, and I think what they're requesting is minimal and should be approved, and I welcome them to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I don't see any. No hands.
Before now, you want to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would request that the board favorably consider the application and the 4 variances that we have sought. I think the case that's been presented to the board addresses the legal criteria associated with each of those variances and provides an adequate record for an approval. Particularly Mr. Kyle's testimony. The McKays are anxious to become Bradley Beach residents. They're anxious to finish the project, and I think you can see from the pictures that it's going to be a substantial improvement to that aspect of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Ready for motion? I make a motion, we approve the application as stated for the McKay residence, Block 20, Lot 7, 603 Park Place Avenue, file number 20-10, BBBA. This is done to correct an oversight by our construction department and issuing a permit that should have been reviewed first. I think the corrections have been, there was no corrections that can be done. It's just that this is what shows and we have to take it forward. I think we can't hurt the homeowner in this situation. I think the variance required are minor, and he did research and answered a lot of the questions we asked in the previous meeting. So I like to approve this this variance.
I'll second it.
Mr. Critelli?
Yes, I agree with Steve. I agree with Cindy that this will be an enhancement of the neighborhood, as well as the Walsh's property on Park Place will be an enhancement to the neighborhood.
Mr. Fuso?
I vote yes. This indeed will be an enhancement to the neighborhood. And as the chair said, you know, we're here to correct an error of our own governmental administration. And I apologize to the folks here that had to go out of their way and deal with the anguish of slowing down a project because of our own internal errors. So I vote yes.
Ms. Phillips?
I vote yes. You have the neighbors that are extremely supportive of you. You have expert testimony tonight. It's a absolutely stunning job and looks wonderful. So thank you and good luck. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Wade?
I also vote yes. It looks like a great project for the neighborhood, and good luck with it.
Mr. Quinlan?
I vote yes, and I just want to sit down and apologize to the people for the inconvenience they were put through because of some administrative screw up, and wish them good luck on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
I vote yes, and I agree with Mr. Chairman that homeowners should not be punished or any detrimental issues to them for this. It was a mistake and we can rectify it.
And Chair Rosenberg?
I vote yes, and we apologize again. Good luck with your project. And
Thank you.
You just got to wait your turn now until everything gets through memorialization and et cetera. But in another month or so, you'll be able to start building.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very
Good
much.
luck to you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations.
Any other thing? We have 2 carry-ons for next meeting, correct?
Yes, next month. I only have 2 applications scheduled, but they're probably going to be lengthy. That's the Kotler application and the appeal of the zoning officer's determination for 217 McCabe.
I think we should do Cutler first, then the other one second.
Yes, we had told them that they could go first.
Okay.
And
Make a
what's the
motion
one
to
we
adjourn
have
the-
for September?
What?
We have an application that we postponed till September?
Yes, we did that one tonight, Ms. Cooter's application.
All right.
I make a motion to adjourn. Have a nice month in the heat next week. And
Take care, everybody.
good luck.
Be careful.
All right. Have a good one.
We go on Zoom next month too, Christine?
Everybody be safe and healthy.
Wear your mask.
Take care.
Have a great day.
We'll see you on video next month.
Or on the boardwalk.
For the rest of the summer.